It all started with a headline. Oxford University apologizes for mocking Filipino English, admits its unique validity. For decades, Filipinos were told their English was wrong, their accents a joke, their grammar something to be fixed. The standard was always someone else's: American, British, never Filipino. This headline wasn't just news, it was a cultural earthquake. Suddenly the world's authority on English was saying, "We were wrong, you were right." Social media exploded. Finally, people wrote. "I'm crying right now. For so long, the rules were made by people who didn't look or sound like them. Now, the referee was admitting the game was rigged. This was about more than language. It was about identity." At the center of it all was Miguel Reyes, a high school English teacher from Iloilo. Years ago, he almost quit teaching because he was ashamed of his accent. He had no idea a simple lesson in his classroom would change everything. His struggle was about to become a global conversation. The world was about to learn what his students already knew. A voice doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful, it just has to be true. The story spread like wildfire, igniting a long overdue conversation. For the first time, Filipinos felt seen and heard. The burden of shame began to lift. And it all began with one headline. Miguel Reyes loved English, but not the sound of his own voice. He was always told his accent was too strong, his English not good enough. Even as a teacher, he felt like a fraud. His students, brilliant but insecure, mumbled answers, afraid of being laughed at. One day, Miguel threw out the lesson plan. Today, he said, we're not talking about American or British accents, we're talking about ours. He shared his own story, his fears, his shame, the professor who said his pronunciation would hold him back. The class was silent, captivated. Language, he told them, is about connection, not performance. Filipino English has its own rhythm, its own melody, its own history. When we say aircon instead of air conditioner, is that wrong? Or is it just ours? Your voice is not broken, he declared. It is Filipino, and it is beautiful. Something shifted. The students sat up straighter, smiled at each other. For the first time, they weren't being corrected. They were being celebrated. Miguel's honesty gave them permission to be proud. The lesson was simple. Speak up. Be loud. Be proud. That day, a new kind of English class was born, and it would echo far beyond those four walls. One student, Maria, recorded Miguel's lesson on her phone. She posted it on TikTok with Dabar Filipino pride. By morning it had gone viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Filipinos everywhere saw themselves in Miguel's words. Nurses, call center agents, students, they all said the same thing. Thank you. The video leapt from TikTok to international news. Major outlets called him the teacher who redefined English. Linguists explained, English isn't owned by one country. Filipino English is real, valid, and beautiful. Miguel was overwhelmed. He never wanted the spotlight, but the messages poured in. Students, parents, teachers, all saying his words changed their lives. He realized this wasn't just his story anymore. It was the story of a nation ready to speak in its own voice. The world was listening. The conversation had begun. Miguel's lesson was no longer just for his students. It was for everyone who had ever felt ashamed of their accent. The movement was unstoppable. Filipino English was finally being celebrated. And it all started with one honest lesson. The world was ready to listen. Weeks after the video went viral, Miguel received an email, an invitation from Oxford University. He thought it was a joke, but it was real. Oxford wanted him as a keynote speaker at their Global Language Symposium. Miguel was terrified. I'm just a high school teacher, he thought. I don't belong there. Old insecurities returned. He pictured himself fumbling in front of the world's top linguists. He told his family he would decline. His mother said, "They didn't invite you to be like them. They invited you to be you." His community rallied. Students made banners, teachers raised money for his ticket, the mayor held a send-off. Miguel realized this wasn't just about him, it was about every Filipino who had ever felt small. With trembling hands, he wrote back, "I accept." The journey to Oxford began. He carried with him the hopes of a nation. He was no longer just Miguel Reyes. He was the voice of Iloilo, the Philippines, and everyone who had ever been told their English was wrong. The world was waiting to hear his story. He was ready to speak. The invitation was more than an honor, it was a turning point. Miguel's lesson was about to go global, and nothing would ever be the same. The teacher from Iloilo was about to make history, all because he dared to speak his truth. The flight to London was the longest of Miguel's life. He'd never left Asia, never felt so small. He clutched his speech, rewritten 20 times, haunted by old doubts. Arriving in Oxford, he was awed and intimidated by the ancient halls. He felt like an outsider, a teacher from a world away. The night before his speech, his confidence collapsed. He called his mother. "I can't do this. I'm a fraud." She reminded him, "Your voice is not broken. It is Filipino. Just tell your truth." Her words steadied him. He looked in the mirror and saw his family, his students, his community. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to represent. He put aside his script. He would speak from the heart. Oxford didn't need another academic lecture. They needed to hear the truth from a teacher from Iloilo. He took a deep breath. He was ready. Tomorrow he would tell their story. The lecture hall was grand, filled with professors, linguists, and journalists. Miguel stood at the podium, nerves jangling. He began with a story. "As a boy, I was taught my English was a mistake. I spent years trying to erase my identity, trying to sound like you." He spoke of shame, insecurity, and the pain of being judged for how you sound. Then his voice grew strong. "Language is not a monument. It is a river. Filipino English is not broken. It's a living, breathing branch of the same tree." He celebrated its music, its poetry, its soul. He gave examples: lambing, aircon, let's go eat, showing the beauty and logic of Filipino English. He ended, "Do not judge us for our accent. Listen to our stories. The goal of language is connection, not perfection." Silence filled the hall. Then, applause erupted, standing ovation, thunderous and long. In that ancient hall, a teacher from Iloilo had rewritten the rules. The critics were silenced. The world was changed. Miguel's voice rang out, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been told to be quiet. The message was clear. Every voice matters. The world was finally listening. Filipino English had arrived, and it was beautiful. The applause was just the beginning. Miguel's words became a global rallying cry. Oxford University issued a statement: "Filipino English is not a deviation, but a legitimate rule-governed form of the language." They launched a research initiative on world Englishes, with a focus on Filipino English. The news sent shockwaves worldwide. Filipino celebrities, from Lea Salonga to Joe Coy, celebrated Miguel's message. Teachers in India, Nigeria, and the Caribbean shared his lesson, adapting it for their own classrooms. A global movement began. English was no longer a rigid set of rules, but a tool for self-expression. Miguel's journey became a parable for anyone who had ever felt their voice didn't matter. It was a victory for every accent, every dialect, every unique voice. The world was learning to listen. The shame was lifting. The movement was unstoppable. Miguel's lesson had changed the world, and it all started in a small classroom in Iloilo. In the Philippines, the change was immediate. Call centers shifted from accent neutralization to clarity and empathy. Employee morale soared, customer satisfaction improved, schools revamped their curriculum, teaching world Englishes and celebrating Filipino English. Teachers used their natural accents. Students wrote stories in their own voices. A national public speaking contest, My Filipino Voice, crowned a winner from Mindanao, her accent thick, her pride unshakable. Filipino YouTubers and comedians embraced their accents and audiences loved it. Phrases like "make tusok the fishball" became badges of pride. When Miguel returned, he was hailed as a hero, but he just wanted to teach. The real heroes, he said, were the students and teachers now speaking with pride. His greatest joy, seeing his students debate, perform, and tell their stories, loud, clear, and proud. The shame was gone. A new confidence had taken root. Filipino English was no longer a punchline. It was a source of pride. Miguel's story marked a permanent shift. Filipino English was no longer a footnote, it was a movement. Universities documented the diversity of English across the Philippines. Writers and poets wove local dialects and English together, creating a new literature. The BPO industry rebranded. Filipino English became a competitive advantage, not a liability. Global clients valued the warmth and sincerity of the Filipino accent. Filipino English entered the mainstream lexicon. Directors sought authentic Filipino voices for film and TV. The world realized diversity is not just what you see, but what you hear. Miguel's lesson helped the world listen better. This was about value. Being different is not being deficient. Miguel reminded a nation, your identity is not something to apologize for. Today, when a Filipino speaks English, there's new music in their voice. Filipino English is no longer a source of shame, it is a badge of honor, and it is beautiful.